They say love is blind, but I never imagined it could be this deaf, this mute, this utterly oblivious to the symphony of lies playing right in front of me. For 25 years, I built my world around him, brick by painstaking brick, believing every promise, every tender touch. Now, as I stand on the precipice of a truth so shattering, I wonder if the fall will finally wake me up, or if I'll simply shatter along with everything I thought was real. The air still smells of his cologne, a cruel reminder of the man who held my hand while secretly digging my grave. And the worst part, I still don't know if I can ever truly escape the wreckage. My name is Eleanor, and I'm 48 years old. For most of my life, I believed in fairy tales, not the kind with glass slippers and princes, but the subtle, everyday magic of a stable home. A loving husband and children who filled our lives with laughter and purpose. Mark, my husband, was the anchor of that dream. We met in college, two awkward bookworms finding solace in each other's quiet company. He was steady, dependable, with a kind smile that always reached his eyes. Our early years were a blur of shared dreams, late-night talks, and the exhilarating chaos of raising two beautiful daughters, Sarah and Emily. We built our life in a charming, slightly too small house in the suburbs, filled with mismatched furniture and the scent of homemade cookies. Looking back, those years feel like a sepia-toned photograph, warm and comforting. A stark contrast to the harsh, blinding light of what was to come. I remember thinking often how lucky I was, how we had truly found our forever. Little did I know, forever had an expiration date I was completely unaware of. The first crack in our seemingly perfect facade wasn't a dramatic earthquake, but a subtle tremor, barely noticeable at first. It started with Mark's new job. He'd been promoted to a senior position at the architectural firm, a role that demanded more travel, longer hours, and an almost constant presence on his phone. I understood, of course. We needed the financial stability, especially with Sarah starting college soon. But the small rituals we cherished began to fade. Our evening walks, the shared cup of coffee on the porch in the mornings, even our weekly date nights became rare occurrences. He'd come home late, exhausted, his eyes glazed over from staring at blueprints and spreadsheets. He'd apologize. Of course, always with that same kind smile. But a new distance began to grow between us. A silent chasm that widened with each missed connection. I tried to bridge it to reignite the spark, but it felt like I was constantly reaching for something just out of my grasp, a phantom limb of our former intimacy. Then came the little things, the almost imperceptible shifts that, in hindsight, screamed warnings I was too blind to see. Mark started dressing differently. New, expensive shirts, a subtle change in his cologne, a more meticulous attention to his appearance that he hadn't shown in years. He'd dismiss my observations, with a shrug saying it was for work, for client meetings. And I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was Mark, my steadfast Mark. He also became more secretive with his phone, always placing it face down, taking calls in another room, or quickly ending conversations when I entered. When I playfully teased him about it, he'd get defensive. A flicker of irritation in his eyes I'd never seen directed at me before. "It's work, Eleanor. Confidential client information," he'd say, his voice a little too sharp. I'd brush it off, telling myself I was being paranoid that the stress of his new job was getting to him. After all, we'd been together for so long. Trust was the bedrock of our relationship. Or so I thought. The girls, Sarah and Emily, were growing up, and their lives became another convenient distraction. Sarah was navigating her first year of college, a whirlwind of new experiences and newfound independence. Emily, still in high school, was immersed in her own world of friends, sports, and teenage angst. Their needs, their triumphs, and their occasional dramas filled our home, creating a vibrant, if sometimes chaotic, backdrop to our lives. I poured my energy into them, into maintaining our home, into my part-time work as a freelance editor. It was easy to get lost in the rhythm of daily life, to ignore the quiet hum of unease that had begun to settle in my chest. Mark was still present, still affectionate in his own way, but it felt like he was performing a role, a well-rehearsed act. The genuine connection, the effortless flow of our conversations, had been replaced by something more strained, more superficial. I told myself it was just a phase, a natural evolution of a long-term marriage. We were comfortable, perhaps too comfortable. The first real jolt came in the form of a forgotten scarf. Mark had left for a business trip to Chicago, a 4-day conference he'd been dreading. As I was tidying up the bedroom, I found a silk scarf, a vibrant emerald green, tucked under his pillow. It wasn't mine. I never wore silk, and certainly not that color. My heart began to pound, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. A cold dread seeped into my veins. I picked it up, the fabric cool and smooth against my fingers, and a faint, unfamiliar scent, sweet and floral, wafted from it. It wasn't Mark's cologne, nor was it my perfume. For a moment, I stood frozen, the scarf clutched in my hand, my mind racing through 1,000 impossible scenarios. Had he bought it as a gift for me and forgotten it? No, he would have presented it with a flourish. Was it a colleague's? Unlikely, given where I found it. The truth, ugly and undeniable, began to claw its way to the surface of my consciousness. But I pushed it down, deep down, desperate to cling to the illusion of our perfect life. I tried to rationalize it away. Maybe it was a cleaning lady's, a stray item from a hotel. My mind, in its desperate attempt to protect itself, conjured up every conceivable innocent explanation. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it began to sprout, its tendrils wrapping around my thoughts, suffocating my peace. I didn't confront Mark immediately. I couldn't. The words felt too heavy, too dangerous. Instead, I tucked the scarf away in a drawer, a silent, damning piece of evidence. I watched him more closely when he returned, searching for any telltale signs, any crack in his composure. He seemed normal, perhaps a little more tired than usual, but otherwise the same Mark. He brought me a small souvenir from Chicago, a silly magnet for the fridge, and kissed me with the same familiar tenderness. The normalcy was almost unbearable, a cruel mockery of the turmoil raging inside me. I felt like an actress in my own life, playing the part of the oblivious wife while a storm brewed beneath the surface. The scarf became a constant, nagging presence in my mind. Every time I opened that drawer, its vibrant green seemed to mock me. I started noticing other things, small discrepancies that I had previously dismissed. Mark's phone bills, for instance. There were calls to an unfamiliar number, always late at night, always for short durations. When I asked him about them, he'd mumble something about a new client, a late-night project. His explanations were vague, his eyes avoiding mine. My intuition, a quiet voice I had learned to trust over the years, was screaming at me. But my heart, stubborn and hopeful, clung to the possibility that I was wrong, that I was simply overthinking, that our 25 years of shared history couldn't possibly be a lie. The fear of what I might uncover was paralyzing. It was easier, safer, to remain in the dark, to pretend that everything was fine, that the life we had built was still intact. The emotional toll began to manifest physically. I found myself constantly tired, even after a full night's sleep. My appetite waned, and I started losing weight. Friends commented on my pallor, asking if I was feeling all right. I'd brush them off with a forced smile, blaming stress or a touch of the flu. But inside, I was a coiled spring, constantly on edge, listening for every creak of the floorboards, every notification from Mark's phone. Our conversations became strained, filled with unspoken accusations and carefully constructed evasions. I felt a growing resentment, a bitter taste in my mouth whenever he spoke of his busy schedule or demanding clients. The man I loved, the man I had built my life with, was becoming a stranger, a shadowy figure moving through our home, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and growing suspicion. One evening, as Mark was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text message. My heart leaped into my throat. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to look, to finally confirm my worst fears. But another part, the part that still clung to hope, hesitated. What if it was nothing? What if I was just being a jealous, insecure wife? The internal battle raged for what felt like an eternity, though it was probably only a few seconds. Curiosity, or perhaps a desperate need for clarity, finally won. My hand trembled as I reached for the phone. The screen lit up, revealing a message from a contact simply saved as A. The message itself was innocuous enough. Thinking of you. Can't wait for next week. But the context, the secrecy, the late hour, it all coalesced into a chilling certainty. A, who was a... And what was happening next week that I wasn't privy to? I quickly put the phone back, my mind reeling. The innocuous message, combined with the emerald scarf and the late-night calls, painted a picture I could no longer deny. It wasn't just a phase, or stress, or my imagination. Mark was having an affair. The realization hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. My vision blurred and the room seemed to spin. 25 years, a lifetime of shared memories, dreams, and sacrifices, all crumbling into dust. The pain was excruciating. A raw, searing agony that ripped through my chest. I felt a profound sense of betrayal, a violation of the deepest trust. But beneath the pain, a cold, hard resolve began to form. I had been living in a fog of denial, but no more. The time for pretending was over. I needed answers, and I was going to get them no matter how painful the truth might be. The battle for my life, for my sanity, had just begun. The days that followed were a blur of forced smiles and internal turmoil. I moved through our house like a ghost, performing the motions of daily life, cooking, cleaning, interacting with the girls, all while a tempest raged within me. Mark seemed oblivious, or perhaps he was just a master of deception. He continued his routine, his late nights, his vague explanations. Each time he kissed me goodbye or offered a casual endearment, I felt a wave of nausea. The hypocrisy was suffocating. I spent hours replaying every conversation, every interaction, searching for clues I had missed. For signs that had been there all along. The A-texts, they were no longer isolated incidents but pieces of a devastating puzzle that was now terrifyingly complete. I felt a profound sense of foolishness, a bitter self-reproach for being so naive, so trusting. How could I have been so blind? How could he have been so cruel? I knew I couldn't confront him without proof. Not yet. I needed more, something undeniable. My mind, usually so focused on the mundane, became a strategic battlefield. I started paying closer attention to his schedule. The thought felt too drastic, too much like something out of a bad movie. The idea of exposing our private pain to a stranger was unbearable. Instead, I decided to become my own detective. I learned to navigate his phone, to check his call logs and messages when he was in the shower or asleep. It felt dirty, invasive, a betrayal of the trust I still irrationally yearned for. But the alternative, living in this agonizing uncertainty, was far worse. My opportunity came a week later. Mark announced another business trip, this time to a conference in San Diego. He'd be gone for 3 days. Was this the key? After he left, I waited until the girls were out. Then I went straight to his study. My hands trembled as I opened his briefcase, searching for the journal. It wasn't locked. Inside, nestled between some conference papers, was the journal. I opened it, my breath catching in my throat. It wasn't a business journal. It was a diary, filled with his neat, familiar handwriting, and the entries weren't about work. They were about her name was Amelia. She was a colleague from a different department, and their friendship had blossomed into something far more intimate over the past year. Every page was a fresh stab to my heart. The journal detailed their clandestine meetings, their shared laughter, their deep connection. He wrote about how Amelia understood him in a way I no longer did. How she reignited a spark he thought was lost. He even described the emerald scarf, a gift he'd bought for her. Each word was a betrayal, a testament to his deceit. He wrote about feeling torn, about loving me but needing something more. The audacity, the sheer arrogance of it made my blood run cold. He was documenting his infidelity, his emotional and physical abandonment of our marriage, as if it were some grand romance. I read until my eyes blurred with tears, until the words on the page became an unbearable weight. The pain was no longer a dull ache. It was a gaping wound, raw and bleeding. The life I thought I had, the man I thought I knew, had been a carefully constructed illusion. And now, the illusion had shattered into a million irreparable pieces. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room surrounded by the silence of our home, the journal clutched in my hands. The anger was a roaring fire, consuming everything in its path. How dare he? The sadness was a deep, dark ocean, threatening to drown me. 25 years gone, reduced to a series of lies and secret rendezvous. By morning, a new emotion had solidified within me. Resolve. I was done being the victim. I was done being the oblivious wife. I would confront him, and I would do it on my terms. I carefully placed the journal back in his briefcase, making sure everything was exactly as I found it. The next 2 days were an exercise in self-control. I went through the motions, picked up groceries, paid bills, even managed a cheerful conversation with Emily about her upcoming school play. But beneath the surface, I was a coiled spring waiting for the moment to strike. I rehearsed the conversation in my head 100 times, trying to anticipate his reactions, his excuses, his denials. I knew he would try to minimize it, to blame me, to beg for forgiveness, but I was beyond forgiveness. The betrayal was too deep, the wound too fresh. I even started researching divorce lawyers, quietly, discreetly. The thought of dismantling our life, of breaking the news to our daughters, was agonizing. But the thought of continuing to live a lie with a man who had so casually discarded our vows was even more so. Mark returned late on the 3rd day, looking tired but otherwise unchanged. He greeted me with a kiss, asked about my day, and started recounting mundane details of the conference. I listened, my face a mask of polite interest, while my heart hammered against my ribs. He looked surprised, a flicker of apprehension in his eyes. We sat in the living room, the same room where we had shared so many dreams, so many quiet evenings. The air was thick with unspoken tension. I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. "Mark," I began, "we need to talk about Amelia." His face went ashen. The color drained from his cheeks and his eyes, usually so kind, filled with a mixture of shock and fear. I pulled the emerald scarf from behind the cushion where I had hidden it earlier and placed it on the coffee table between us. "This scarf," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "belongs to Amelia, doesn't it? The one you bought for her? The one you keep in your briefcase, along with your little diary of your grand romance?" His jaw dropped. He looked from the scarf to me, then back to the scarf, his eyes wide with disbelief. The carefully constructed facade he had maintained for months, perhaps even years, crumbled before my eyes. He was caught exposed and utterly defenseless. He tried to deny it at first, a desperate, pathetic attempt to salvage what little dignity he had left. "Eleanor, I can explain, single quotes," he began, his voice hoarse, but I cut him off. "There's nothing to explain, Mark. I've read your journal, every word, every sordid detail of your affair." The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the frantic pounding of my own heart. He finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of shame and regret. "I'm so sorry, Eleanor," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I never meant to hurt you." The apology felt hollow, meaningless. In that moment, looking at the broken man before me, I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, pain, but also a profound sense of clarity. The illusion was gone, and with it, the suffocating weight of denial. I knew what I had to do. "This isn't something we can just fix. You've destroyed everything." I stood up, the scarf still lying between us, a silent testament to his betrayal. "I want a divorce." The words, once so terrifying, now felt liberating. The path ahead would be difficult, filled with pain and uncertainty. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope, a sense of reclaiming my own life. The fairy tale was over, but a new story, one of resilience and self-discovery, was just beginning. And this time, I would be the author.